All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome to week 4. Tell them in the lovely pavilion. Still Steve's office for the day. And today we're going to talk about something that you probably think is really boring right now, but as you get older, it'll have a huge impact on your life. And so it's good to just get introduced to it. Today we're going to talk about taxes. So today it's basically that's it. It's everything that I think you should know from a really basic level. And then as we get older, obviously you'll learn more and more about it. But it's something you hear referenced all the time, and it's good to just know what they are. So looking back at the last few weeks, first thing, I hope everyone knows that now, but business and economy, business is just what do we do to earn money? And the economy is everything around us that has to do with buying and selling things, working, all of that. And then looking at last week, we asked, what's the public sector? And that was when things were owned by the government. And then the private sector is when it was owned by individuals. So if I owned a business, that'd be part of the private sector, where something like Centerlink is owned by the government, or a police station, or a fire, anything with that. And then we talked to you about just why do we need to have both sectors. And the big thing was that the private sector, we create things and we sell things, and that's good. But the public sector, those are jobs that they might not generate income, but we need them. Like a police officer is the perfect example. No one's really going to pay a police officer for, they're not producing anything, they're not doing anything in that sense, but we need them. They're a very, very essential part of our life. So that's why the government pays them. So looking at the questions from last week, I'm not going to go through them all, but all of you did really well. I always really enjoy reading through those, so well done. And all right, so today we're talking about taxes. What is tax? Basically, it's how we fund the public sector. So when you see police officers and soldiers and politicians and judges, they don't work for a company per se, but we need to pay them, and we pay them through taxing things. So we tax people, get money that way, and then that money goes to those people. So this really important wordage on here too, where it says tax refers to money that we forcibly take from people and companies, because it's not optional. You have to pay taxes. And that's the big takeaway, is taxes are not an optional thing. If you participate and you work and you buy things, you have to pay taxes. And then at the bottom saying everyone pays taxes in one form or another, but not equally. And we'll go over what I mean by that. But not everyone pays the same amount or the same rate of tax. So this list could have been so much longer, but the big thing is what types of things are taxed. And I put that picture in there because it really is true that nothing is certain but death and taxes. Everyone pays them. It's just a part of life. So the number one tax you probably heard of is an income tax, and that's tax off the money that you actually earn. So like when I work here, when I get my paycheck, it says right on there how much tax the government took out of it right away. Goods and services tax, it's GST. So that's if you went to like Woolies or Coles and you buy things, you'd see that. And that's attached on to all of our goods in Australia. That's 10% and added on. The next one, I highlighted these ones because they're kind of important. The next one is stocks and investments. It's called a capital gains tax. So the idea with that, you wouldn't have to you're a bit older, but the idea with that is if I bought a house and when I bought it, it was worth a certain amount, and when I sold it, it was worth way more, they actually make you pay a tax on that amount that value of that property increased, which is really weird sounding, but it's common around the world. Almost every country does it. And same thing if you invest. Say if I invested in like Apple, and Apple, the price went way up and I gained lots of money, they actually tax you on that money because they say it's earned money. Now we're looking, there's some weird ones now. So I don't know if any of you know this, but there's a tax when you die. And it's called the death tax. And it's basically if you are worth over a certain amount of money, when you die, the government gets to take a certain percentage of the money that you've earned, and your family gets the rest of it. So that's a really controversial one. There's inheritance tax, which is, if you're getting money from that, if you've inherited it from a family member. Property taxes. So if you bought a property and you own it and you live in it, you still actually have to pay taxes to the government just to keep that property. There's all sorts of these. Fuel taxes, so we pay taxes on the petrol we buy. And there's even in Australia, we have a luxury car tax. So if you buy an imported car, so a car they've sent from somewhere else in the world that's worth, I think it was over $75,000, you actually have to pay an additional amount of money on that just to the government. And then the last one Pretty much every society now, we do taxes on things like cigarettes, alcohol, and a lot of unhealthy foods. And that's the government's way of trying to persuade you to not purchase those things. And a lot of times, a lot of people justify it too by saying that, we know cigarettes and alcohol are really bad for your health. So if you're buying those things, we should tax it, and then we can use that money into our healthcare system. So there's lots of different reasons for that. The big takeaway is there's all sorts of things we pay taxes on. So now we're looking at how does a tax work? So all taxes are a little bit different, but basically the government takes a certain percentage of whatever money, or a certain percentage of money for whatever they're taxing. So the example I put in there is for incomes. That's the money I earn. So if I get my paycheck and I made $100, I'll see on there that the government said I have to pay 32.5%, and they take $32.50 out of every $100 I earn. And so I would get to keep $67.50. And you can see pretty quickly why this is so important, because we're all, yourself included, myself included, everyone, we're all losing a lot of money to taxes. So it's a good thing for us to understand what's going on with it. So I actually just looked up 2 charts, and this is for the Australian government, is how much money does the government get each year. So this one's just showing the taxes we pay in. And you can see on the far left where it says individuals income tax, the 201 billion. So you can see that the vast majority of the money the government receives is from income tax, so from our paychecks. But then there's all sorts of other revenue they get too. So the big one's sales tax. That would be the GST. That was 64 billion. There's the fuel tax. There's customs, non-tax revenue, the superannuation, so that's your retirement account ones, but we're not going to really worry about a lot of the other ones. The biggest ones we're looking at is just the individual income tax. That's kind of the big one. And then know that sales tax is a thing because it's GST. And then we're looking at how much or how does the government actually spend our money? Because this is one of the big things you hear, and you might have heard your parents or relatives or anything talk about how the government just wastes their money, or they're always spending it on blah, 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 things that they don't agree with. And so the government actually does have to put out where they spend this money. And you can see that the biggest chunk by far of the Australian government's money goes to Social Security and welfare. So a lot of people complain about, people who aren't working getting money and things like that. And they are getting a lot of money, but a lot of times it's really necessary. And then you can see healthcare is a huge cost, education, defense. So all kind of the things you'd think that we do need to spend money on as a society, they're all kind of there. And it's interesting to actually see it represented like that. So now we're looking at why do we use taxes? And kind of like I explained before, if we didn't have taxes, there'd be no way to make sure our society operates in a safe and productive way. Because taxes pay for everything in the public sector. So everything that's government owned or run, the taxes pay for that. So this means that hospitals, schools, police, firefighters, politicians, and even the military are all funded by taxes. And I think all of us agree that we definitely need to have all of those things. Otherwise, we wouldn't really have a society that we can live in. So this leads me to, some of you might be sitting there going, well, I'm not going to pay it. I just won't do it. I'm not going to send my money. So if you do that, that's actually a really big deal. It's called tax fraud or tax evasion. And basically what that is say if you lied about the amount of money you made, or you tried to pretend that you didn't make it. And people have done this all over the world, or tried to hide, in certain, put it in different accounts, things like that. Basically, the Australian government has been called the ATO, which is the Australian Taxation Office. And whenever you file your taxes at the end of the year, and they look at everyone, and if they knew that you lied or anything like that, it's a really big deal. You can pay really heavy fines, or you can even go to jail for avoiding taxes. They take it very seriously. So unfortunately, like I said before, we all have to play this game. It's in there for everyone. So this brings us to, does everyone pay the same amount of tax? So the answer there is like a yes and a no, where we all pay it, but it's different. We all pay relative to our income. And I think a really easy way to think of this is we wouldn't expect a police officer to pay the same amount of tax as someone who's like a billionaire business owner. It wouldn't make sense. They just wouldn't make enough money to even touch what that person makes. But there's a lot of arguments about this. And this is where you find a lot of political parties completely switch, is their idea of how taxes should be based. And there's a lot of people have an idea that we should all just pay the exact same percentage of our income, where everyone just pays 10%. No matter whatever you make, you pay 10% of it. That would be called a flat rate tax, where we don't have that. Instead, we have this tax bracket. It looks really confusing, but I'll explain it quickly. Basically, as we earn more money, we pay more tax. So which makes sense. If you had a billionaire, 10% of his money is a lot more than 10% of my money. That works. But then we go a step further than that. And you can see on here, as you make more money, your actual percentage you pay is more. So if I was someone who made $50,000 a year, I pay 32.5% of what I make. But if I was someone who makes $100,000 a year, I pay 37% of what I make. So not only are you paying more as a percentage, you're actually paying a higher percentage as well. And that's pretty controversial, but basically every country in the world's adopted that method. And this is actually something you'll do a lot more in, like, when you're in years 10, 11, and 12. We spend a lot of time learning about this stuff. So you might be asking me, if everyone pays the same, or we can just go off that bracket, why do we even think about this? Why does it matter? It's just going to come out of my paycheck anyways. Well, the big reason is because there are a lot of legal ways to pay less taxes. And these are called tax deductions. So these are things that, like mandatory expenses or things that you have to spend money on, that the government goes, you know what, that's okay. You don't need to pay tax on that money that you've spent on that, because we kind of get it. So you can actually lower the amount of money you make in their eyes, which means you pay less tax. So if you have children, which are called dependents for tax purposes, so if you have someone that you take care of, a lot of the money you spend on them, you don't have to pay tax on. If you own a business, there's a lot of different tax deductions because there's a lot of risk involved in that, a lot of expenses you have to pay. Next one is there's lots of money for work expenses. So all of you would have been on Odyssey. And even for Odyssey, like when I have to pay for my petrol to go up there and back, I can claim that and actually spend or to pay less in taxes because they go, oh, you spent that money for work. Or if I had to buy a new computer for work, things like that. Healthcare and education costs are also big ones. And then even donations to charity. So if I make a certain amount of money and I donate a lot of my money to charity, the government isn't going to tell me that I have to pay tax on that money. They'll say, oh, that's okay. We understand, like, you were donating your money. You're not going to have to pay tax on it too. And that's only a few of them. There are hundreds of things that are tax deductions. And that's a really, smart way to pay less in tax. So why is this important? So the big thing is, like I was saying, all of you, you're going to have to pay taxes, and it'll significantly impact your life. It does to everyone. And knowing this, it's really important for us to understand as much as we can about it. And you'll notice as you get older that taxes are the number one thing basically discussed in politics, because everyone wants to feel like they are paying their fair share. No one wants to feel like I pay way more, relative for my income than someone else does. No one wants to feel like they're the one who's, being burdened by government. Everyone wants to make it feel like everyone's paying their fair share and everyone's happy with what they get. So I've got 9 questions for you today. First one is just, what is a tax? What do you think it is? Next one, name 3 different types of taxes that we use in Australia, which we just talked about. I mean, you can get creative. You could Google them if you want, but remember, like income, death, inheritance, all those taxes. Number 3 was, what happens if I refuse to pay my taxes? 4, where does the government spend the largest part of taxpayers' money? So you can look at those graphs I put up. Number 5, does everyone pay the same amount of tax? And that should be a pretty obvious answer by now. Number 6 is, what is a tax deduction? And you could even just give me an example if you want. Number 7, do you think taxes are fair? So that's totally your opinion. And you can even ask your parents what they think too and go off of that. Number 8, in your opinion, what are the 3 most important things that our taxes pay for? So do you think it's police, firefighters, healthcare, schools, soldiers? Your choice. And number 9, if everyone in Australia stopped paying taxes tomorrow, what do you think would happen? So this isn't something we have to worry about, but what would happen if the government basically had no money anymore to spend? What do you think would happen to our whole country at that point? And that is everything that I have for all of you guys. So enjoy, good luck, and I'm available during all these classes, so please just email me or give me a shout if you need. Thanks, guys.